Here's a little taste of Iron Man, and get used to Iron Man because a little later on we're going to see an overwhelming amount of him. But this is one of his big boy armor, the Mark 38, otherwise known as Igor. Now I'll say this big fig version of him is a lot better than the official brick built Mark 38 from the Hall of Armor set. Wow, what were they thinking with that one? Anyway, this Iron Man is ranked well below the other Iron Man suits because his bigger size kind of restricts him. Mainly, he can't fly like most Iron Man suits, and he's too big to interact with shield terminals like most Iron Man variants, and on top of that, he doesn't have laser or explosive, which are some of Iron Man's most useful abilities that this Mark 38 doesn't have. But as a big boy, he can do big boy stuff like strength, super jump, cracked wall, wall climbing, and immunity to fire, gas, and toxins. But even though Igor here is a big boy, there's an even bigger Iron Man suit, the Hulkbuster. And if you remember, at the beginning of the series, I said the Hulkbuster isn't going to be on the ranking since the Hulkbuster doesn't have its own icon on the roster. However, the Hulkbuster doesn't have that much going on with it that most Iron Man suits don't have. It's mainly just that the Hulkbuster is bigger and got its own section of a level in the campaign, which was, honestly pretty cool. In the anger management level, you control the Hulkbuster with a unique UI and a drone perspective from above. It's pretty cool for a level to have its own little quirk in LEGO games because it's honestly pretty rare during this time in LEGO games. In any case though, Igor is obviously inferior to the Hulkbuster, but I thought I'd take the time to address the Hulkbuster situation, because I don't think I'll ever have another opportunity to do that. The Mindless One was a character available in the all-new, all-different Doctor Strange DLC. He wasn't really in the level itself, but he was sprinkled in as an afterthought to make the DLC more worth the money. As you can see, he's kind of cool to look at least to me anyway. He's a big old rock guy with the red visor for eyes. The wiki describes the Mindless Ones as virtually unstoppable engines of destruction. The Mindless Ones showed up a surprisingly good number of times across the entire Marvel Universe. Captain America fought them in World War II, Thor fought them when Loki summoned them, Spider-Man went to the Dark Dimension for some reason and fought them, among a bunch of other appearances. I think the Mindless Ones were just plopped in for conflict whenever the Dark Dimension was the setting, but in this game, the Mindless One is similar to a bunch of the big boys we've seen earlier in the series. He has strength, super jump, wall climbing, cracked wall, fire and toxin immunity, and a regenerative health. I'd expect for the Mindless One to have full immunity since they're supposed to be unstoppable engines of destruction, but no character has full immunity aside from Butterball from the beginning of the series. Remember that guy? Wendigo looks like some giant white furred monster, and that's exactly what he is, really. The Wendigo is a race of monsters, and people morph into them when they eat human flesh in the Canadian wilderness. It's one of the stranger curses out there, and it's weird that you have to be a cannibal in Canada specifically to become a member of the club. Anyway, the Wendigo is a monster that the Hulk faces more than anyone else, and that makes sense to me. Most of Hulk's adversaries are big and angry things. It's stated that there are only 1 or 2 Wendigos at a time, and that also makes sense because the circumstances to become a Wendigo is quite specific. But then again, if you've played the Guardians of the Galaxy Square Enix game, these guys show up and there's like quite a few that you have to kill.
Another up there.
Wendigo! But Wendigo is basically a reskin of the Mindless One, or it would actually be the other way around since Wendigo isn't a DLC character. Wendigo is just cooler. I like the simplistic design of the Mindless One, but Wendigo's Sasquatch appearance in conjunction with that out-of-place tail just makes me content in a weird way. Here's a weird character that made it into this game, and she is actually introducing a semi-new ability. Now, we've seen a few characters that can change forms. For example, the Scott Lang Ant-Man can switch into Scott Lang, but in that case, it was strictly for show and didn't really add anything to the character. With Gorilla Girl, she can change form and it actually has a purpose. Well, firstly, let me go over what makes her special. She has the ability to transform into a gorilla at will. Pretty simple of a concept. As a gorilla, she has the abilities of a lot of the big boys we've already seen. She has strength, super jump, wall climbing, and cracked wall. However, hold down the change character button and she transforms into her alter ego, Fanbulla Eddie. Her alter ego doesn't have any abilities aside from agility, but at least it's something. It's kind of neat to be able to transform from one form into another and have it give the character one or more abilities they wouldn't have in the other form. So in this case, I consider transform its own ability. We'll see this with other more notable characters coming up. After Abomination, General Thunderbolt Ross and or Red Hulk is probably the Hulk's most noted villain. Although we haven't seen Red Hulk in the MCU, and we probably won't after the unfortunate passing of William Hurt, I guess we'll see if we'll ever see the Red Hulk, whether they recast or some other way. But Red Hulk is continuing the trend of Gorilla Girl from the last segment, which is the fact that he can transform to add a little something extra. Firstly, as Red Hulk, he has a lot of the abilities the other big boys have, like strength, super jump, wall climbing, cracked wall, and fire toxin immunity. Red Hulk, in this case, can transform into General Ross. Now, General Ross doesn't add all that much aside from that gun he has. Now, in past LEGO games I've covered, like LEGO Incredibles, I included Target as an ability, where they can shoot targets. This game also has the same target, but I don't consider target an ability in this game. And that's for the simple reason that there are so many characters with the target ability that it would just be, like agility, basic, but worse, honestly. Whether it's a gun like General Ross or elemental balls like a lot of superpowered characters, it's gonna be way too common. Including target as an ability is almost like counting punching slightly faster as an ability. The logic there is a little flawed, I'll admit, but you get what I'm saying. In any case, General Ross has a gun, and that's all he adds to his ability set when he transforms from Red Hulk. A long time ago, we covered the Scott Lang Ant-Man, and now we're going over the OG Ant-Man, Hank Pym. Funnily enough, there are two Hank Pym Ant-Man variants, and this is the one that was available in the Ant-Man DLC. This is the Michael Douglas version, and you can even switch into Hank Pym in regular clothing. This Ant-Man suit is basically a recolor of the Scott Lang suit, as that was the case for the Ant-Man Lego set that came out alongside the movie. In that set, there was Scott Lang Ant-Man, Hank Pym Ant-Man, Yellow Jacket, and a buildable Anthony. Ugh. Since that set came out before the movie, many thought that the set spoiled the fact that Hank Pym donned his own suit for the movie, but that didn't end up being the case. This Ant-Man suit is just a dark version of the Scott Lang suit, basically, but since there are two variants of the Hank Pym Ant-Man and both variants have the same abilities, I'll save the abilities for the next segment. Well, this one can switch into pedestrian Hank Pym, which he does nothing, really, and the other Hank Pym Ant-Man in this game is much cooler, in my opinion. Yeah, here's the other superior version of the Hank Pym Ant-Man. This is the one that came in the base game and is based off the classic comics from whence he came. I'm a sucker for wacky comic book outfits that Marvel superheroes had back in the 60s. It's truly a shame that we don't have a gold suit variant of Iron Man in this game, or a Thor with his winged helmet. I mean, there's no reason not to, since this game has already stretched for characters beyond comprehension. And we've seen it so much already, and we're going to see it again and again and again. But it's at least nice to see Ant-Man was done true to his roots with that fantastic helmet of his. As for abilities, the Hank Pym Ant-Mans have exactly what you would expect. Being based on an ant due to his shrinking powers, that lends him to the size, stealth, and great abilities. And finally, being a smart guy who developed the technology of shrinking, and also not ever sharing the secrets to his scientific breakthroughs, he has technology and scan. Needless to say, this guy has the right to all of his abilities, which isn't always the case. Remember a little while ago in part 16 where I discussed Meteorite, who was a Thunderbolt and her original villain persona is in this game? Well, here she is. Moonstone here was also not in the base game, but rather from the Captain Marvel DLC and not the Thunderbolts one. Moonstone, at first glance, wouldn't look like a villain, at least not to me. She looks pretty benevolent in her icon, but apparently in the comics, she's as evil as can be. It's ironic. Her meteorite persona, which is supposed to be good, looks more like a villain than her actual villain persona. Moonstone here is pretty generic when it comes to the term superpowered beings. She can fly, she can shoot lasers, she has strength and cracked wall, like all the standard stuff. There's nothing that sets her apart, if that makes sense. Like Spider-Man and his spider powers sets him apart from the rest. Thor and his lightning sets him apart from the rest. Even Superman stands out from the rest based solely on the fact that he has every power and no one else does. She's just not unique. But then again, and it would be hard to be unique in this day and age of comic books, where every type of power has been done. That's not to say Marvel hasn't tried. In 2020, they tried to reboot the New Warriors with all new characters, one of which was named Screen Time, whose power is that he's connected to the internet via experimental internet gas. So yeah, that just proves my point that creating new characters is next to impossible, without looking like a fool, at least. Oh, also, I should probably mention Moonstone has agility and regenerative health, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. WARBIRD is one of the several aliases Carol Danvers went by. If you haven't realized by now, Carol Danvers can't seem to keep the same superhero name for more than 5 minutes. Well, she's gone by Captain Marvel for a while now, but I don't foresee that changing anytime soon after her entering the MCU as Captain Marvel. But ever since the MCU took off, all Marvel media seems to have followed suit. Like, with Captain Marvel, the chances of her changing aliases in the comics now is minimal. The Guardians of the Galaxy lineup was consistently changing since they aren't all that well known, but after their appearance in the MCU, it seems to be the same 5 characters, whether it's in the comics or video games. Same with Avengers. After Black Panther's MCU suit, that seems to be the design they take inspiration from in all other media, like Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. I could go on, but I mean, you get it. And I don't blame Marvel for doing that. The MCU is their biggest source of revenue, so to parallel it in other media, it's just business. But enough with my rambling. WARBIRD is the same as Moonstone in terms of abilities. So she has strength, agility, flight, regenerative health, laser, and cracked wall. We just went over his creator from the comics, and now we're getting the first official taste of Ultron in this series. Outside of his sentries, at least. Now, I did not expect this specific variant of Ultron to be this high on the list, but he has quite a few abilities on his belt that makes him really useful. My main concern about this guy is that zombie walk of his. This is the first mark of Ultron, and also the beat up Iron Legion bot that Ultron took control of when he confronted the Avengers in Avengers Tower. However, that walk of his doesn't really slow him down as much as I thought it would, and the 6 abilities of the Mark I Ultron kind of carries him. But there are a few abilities this Ultron is missing that perplexes me. First off, let's go over some of his abilities. He has backup, where he calls in Ultron sentries. I mean, if we're getting technical, it would make more sense for the Mark I Ultron to call in Iron Legion instead of Ultron sentries, because the Ultron sentries weren't constructed yet at this point in the movie, right after Ultron's birth. But I'll allow it, I guess. He has regenerative health, which makes sense. Mark I Ultron, being a hacking robot, can both repair and hack shield terminals, and also interact with Hydra terminals alongside that. Now here's the confusing part. Mark I Ultron doesn't have a technology or scan, which is shocking to be honest. I mean, Ultron must have used technology to transfer his consciousness to the Mark I armor, and scan usually gets lumped in with tech-based characters, so why are they absent here? Yeah, Mark I Ultron doesn't have technology, but he does have Cosmic, to add insult to injury. Cosmic is the final ability to be covered in the series, and Mark I Ultron has it for some reason. There are sparkling black Lego in this game, and those with the Cosmic can blow them up. Cosmic is usually reserved for space-based characters, but Ultron is the exception. All Ultron variants have the Cosmic ability, and it doesn't really make sense. I think Ultron was given Cosmic just because the big bad guys are usually given rare abilities in LEGO games. Like how dark magic seemed to be everywhere in the LEGO Harry Potter games, but getting your hands on a character who can actually use dark magic takes some time. But yeah, Mark I Ultron definitely should not have Cosmic, but I can't deny that it carried him this high in the list.